everybody, welcome back to Form Check Friday. It's us. We're here again.
We're here
with Danny once more, the wonderful and lovely Coach Danny of Calgary Barbell, to give us a hand critiquing everybody's techniques, answering questions about powerlifting, helping people progress. And we have a special announcement today. Very excited about this one, and that is that Form Check Friday is now officially sponsored by Bells of Steel. So huge shout out to Bells of Steel. They've been a supporter of ours for quite some time. And I'm sure if anybody's paid any attention or can see in the background, we have a lot of Bells of Steel equipment in here that we use regularly. And Bells of Steel does a wonderful job at supplying quality products at affordable prices for home gym and strength training connoisseurs, if you will. They got great bars. I really love their machined plates. And the Hydra Rack, is it, Dylan? Is that the one we have? Yeah, the Hydra Rack with the plate storage is fantastic. We also have the lat stack. I don't know what they ended up calling it, but we have a really great combination pull down and seated row that is probably one of my favorite pieces of equipment we've gotten from them. It takes up a very small footprint and you can absolutely load the piss out of it. And it's lovely. So if you want to support us and check out Bells of Steel, and you should, they're a local Calgary company. Danny used to work for them.
I did do a little bit of work for them. And personally, as a coach, I love that they make it accessible for my home gym athletes to be able to do accessory work, because I feel like just having a barbell sometimes is a little bit limiting and can get a little bit monotonous. So having cables and various attachments for their racks and making it customizable is really cool.
Yeah. So head into the description below. If you're going to pick up some Bells of Steel stuff, support the channel, you can do it all at the same time. Now, should we get into it here?
Yes.
All right, so we got Aiden here, and I'm gonna read you a little bit about Aiden that he sent in his email. So he says he struggles with hitting competition depth with heavier weights specifically. So in the video, he says he feels like he's fairly close. He said, you may think otherwise, but to me seems just high. So this is his first time squatting in heeled shoes, but he feels really sort of weak and unstable in the bottom. He says he's working with a great coach on this and has made a lot of progress in his technique, but still struggling to find depth and get into the bottom of it. So he says if he goes deeper, usually gets shifted forward and he really has to grind out of the bottom. Wondering if you have any advice, wondering if maybe it's due to bracing, hip mobility, ankle mobility, or something else. Struggles with bad mobility in general and knee stability. Wants to know our thoughts. Feels like if he could get slightly deeper and not get pitched forward, his squat would improve a lot. And yeah, we'll go from there. So I was reading, you were watching. What do you see? What do you think here, Danny?
Well, first thing that stands out is the belt looks a little bit low, I would say.
Okay.
And then another thing that I kind of like gravitate towards is like in the first rep, more so, I feel like he looks like he's kind of biasing more weight into his heels, kind of trying to be a little bit too upright, and I think that's probably some of the limitation in finding depth. Like he's just not able to get his hips back far enough. So I'm wondering if maybe just putting more pressure into like the big toe and like pinky toe could be beneficial for him, and maybe even going back to flats, because I think in a heeled shoe sometimes we're going to maybe bias the heels, weight in the heels a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think for me the biggest thing looks like, number one, I think there's some hesitation, right? Because you said yourself it's heavier weights, and I would love to see an example of you getting pitched forward in the bottom. Right, I would love to see an example where you actually do go all the way to depth, even if you get pitched forward, and then we can kind of diagnose it from there. Because what I'm thinking, and again, I have to use a little bit of conjecture here, but what I'm thinking is that we are, like Danny said, trying to be really upright. It looks like we're really trying to keep the chest up. You know, we're looking straight out. We're trying not to like let this chest come forward at all. And I think probably what happens if you go deeper is we go from this kind of extended position into a more neutral position. And I know it seems like every time we look at a squat on here, it's like, are you bracing? Chest down. You know, have you worked on your bracing? We need a more neutral position. But it does seem like you know, that's a thing that very, very repeatedly comes up. When we're in this more extended position, not only are we going to feel like we run out of room earlier in the hips, because the hip flexors are going to be just in that much more of a sort of stretched or tightened or whatever kind of position, right? It's going to feel like we're out of room in the hip. Whereas if we were a little more neutral, you'd be able to get that hip a little lower without feeling that same amount of like being bound up. And the thing that I'm willing to bet is happening when you do go deeper than that is that we go from this extension into all of a sudden now we're neutral. And that means the bar's rolling from here to here. And then yes, we're gonna lose balance, right? If that bar's bullying you forward so that you can get into depth, we're gonna lose some balance there. So I would say number one thing is address the bracing. Try not to get into that anterior pelvic tilt where we're pushing the hips out behind you like that, and try to just like keep them in line. And yes, the hips should travel backwards, but we don't want the whole system to go like this. We want it to be, you know, neutral here and then tilt and still be neutral. So like letting that chest forward to an extent. I also like what Danny said about the heels. I've been experimenting squatting in flats myself, and I don't know if I notice a huge difference necessarily in terms of a lot of it, but the one thing I do really notice is that I feel way more organized through like this sort of like mid to top third of the lift. And into the bottom, I feel like I'm able to maintain my brace and I'm not getting that like moment of looseness in order to get depth, which I think is another thing that it sounds like you're kind of describing here, Aiden, is that like that little bit of falling forward in the bottom. So yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think the belt placement is also a good catch. I don't know if I would have caught that, but it does look a little low.
Yeah, I feel like it's a teeny bit low there.
Yeah.
One thing I will say too, like just from a coaching perspective, is I just feel like this is like a little heavy. It looks like because it is heavy, you are skipping out on that little bit of depth that you could be training. So I would honestly put you like dial it back a little bit and then really emphasize like the things that we're talking about today. You're not going to be able to like ingrain new patterns if you're just kind of like fighting against the weight of the bar like the whole set. So pull it back a little bit, try out the new technique, and then build up from there rather than suffering every session. yeah,
exactly. And like there's an argument, I think, that, you know, going in and squatting high, like it's one of those, it's a type 1 error, as Taylor would like to say. And it's unfortunately like none of these would count in a competition, right? And if you're training and making these type 1 errors, it's hard to say whether or not that training is very useful, right? Because if you were squatting to depth and falling forward, then it's like, okay, well, we can address the falling forward, right? We can really kind of get into the reasoning and the you know, the mechanics and whatever leading to you falling forward. But because we're just squatting high, like the number one thing we need to do is just squat deeper. And it is like, to some extent, it is kind of that easy. And if it's one of those things where it becomes challenging once the weight gets heavy, then that just means we're using too much weight right now, right? We're not able to do the full range of motion with the weights that we're selecting for our training. That'd be like if somebody was doing bench training and not touching their chest. And they're like, well, you know, I have a hard time touching my chest when it gets heavy. At some point, you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah. Really. So, yeah, I mean, best of luck with everything. I think a lot of what's there is really good. And I think with a couple slight adjustments and, you know, probably pulling the weight back a little bit, I think you'll be well on your way.
It's 2 weeks in a row we've said just squat deeper, so we might get fired. Or I might get fired.
No, you're good. I say that every week, I think.
Just a reminder.
So up next we got a deadlift from Michael. Holy, he's got some weight on the bar. First video is 310, second video is 305. I think this is the 310 we're looking at. So for the last year and a half, his deadlift doesn't feel good and it's very unpredictable. Do you have any tips or any technical things that I might be doing wrong? In the 310, he said he had RP8 and they came out 2, but something went wrong. It's definitely not due to strength. So I'm not sure exactly what he means there. I think he means he was supposed to go for a triple at RPE 8 and he only got 2 reps. And then it looks like he dialed the weight back for a subsequent set. But as we can see, he missed the, oh, okay. So the 305 is in here. So inconsistencies.
Honestly, hip height looks a little inconsistent, like rep to rep on that 305.
Yeah, hey? Even on the 305, hey?
Yeah.
Where's our first rep of 305? Okay.
Maybe a little bit behind the bar as well.
So,
also straps.
yeah. The first thing I was gonna say is, Michael, you're saying that this issue was definitely not due to strength, and I would say you missed the rep. I mean, it is at some level due to strength, you know what I mean? And I think if you're telling yourself otherwise after missing a rep, probably, regardless of whether it was strength or not, we have to think about the strength of executing heavy lifts like this as a skill. So whether it's a strength or a skill issue, those two things in powerlifting are so intricately intertwined that you kind of can't have one without the other, because if you're missing either side of that, you miss a weight, right? You miss a rep.
Especially sumo pulling.
Yeah. So I would say whether or not it's due to strength, treat it like it's due to strength. And by doing so, you're going to constrain the amount of weight you're loading on the bar for your work. And if we're already feeling inconsistencies, it's likely that doing some more moderate work is going to help you iron out those consistencies. If we're butting up into the top end of what we're capable of intensity-wise constantly, and we're feeling inconsistent, you know, we're not gonna be able to iron out those inconsistencies. You know, training at like a 9+ RPE, and that's part of why I like RPE, right? Because in my sort of judgment of RPE, I want that to be relatively impartial as to whether or not it was strength or, you know, RPE isn't were you strong enough for one more rep, but you just messed it up. It's like, no, how many more reps could you have done?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, no more. That was an RPE 10. Regardless of what caused it to go wrong, we missed the rep. So that should inform future weight selection. Getting past that.
I also just feel like 305 to 310 is like a pretty weird jump. It looks like these were done in the same day.
Yeah, so he said he went for this 310 set. He missed the third rep, so then he came down to 305.
Okay.
Yeah, came down to 305 afterwards. Yeah, I think.
So here we look like more over the bar, and then on 305, it really looks like we're like sitting back into it. And I'm not sure if it's just me, but the left leg on this one looks more externally rotated and almost wider, like in his positioning.
Like his left side here looks further out. Yeah,
and I'm not sure
to tell if that's camera or not, but okay.
Yeah, you can see the ring on that side is like mid shin, and then here, maybe.
Anyways, what we're getting at there?
Just foot position.
Okay.
Being a little bit off, yeah.
Okay, so just being like slightly uneven in terms of how toed out. I think the thing that I'm seeing here is that we have this tendency to really want to like do an eccentric, right? Like you get this first one, kind of like it gets pretty tough, gets a little stuck, and then from here you're like really easing it down. And I think one of the reasons we're probably finding inconsistencies, and you know, if we watch this set, rep 1 was harder than rep 2, right? That's not really how we want deadlifts to go. I mean, obviously. So we need to find a way to create this position without having first set down the bar. And one of the best ways to do that is to stop setting down the bar like that every time and creating your position based off of the eccentric of your previous rep. That's a really good tool for beginners to help them understand what the positioning is. But like, what was it about this position for rep 2 that made it so much better than rep 1? So let's take a look at rep 1 here, right? So it's kind of hard to see, but we've got hip height maybe about there. You got one knee, and we'll say shoulder there, and we'll put the crease of your t-shirt on there too. And then we'll fast forward. So rep 2. So rep 2, hips are substantially lower. We have a fair bit more flexion in the back. The knees are a fair bit more forwards. And rep 2 is cleaner and smoother. So, you know, when we're setting the weight down in this way where you're really squatty with it, now obviously on rep 3 that leads to us being probably a little bit too flexed and then getting stuck at the top. But I think we'll probably see a similar thing here, right? So we've got hip height-ish, knees, shoulder. All right. So let's see. And then we sit the weight down like we're doing a squat, and then we pull from here. So your reps are very inconsistent in terms of how much your knees are forward, how much you're sitting down, how upright your torso is, how flexed your torso is, your shoulder position relative to the bar. It looks like on your reps 2 and onwards, everything is like way behind the bar, right? If we were to see this from the side, I would bet shoulder blades here and bar is like here, right? And then before you come off the floor, right, you see that kind of pull forward. And then with 305, like you're just strong enough to kind of muscle through it. But I think one of the reasons we're seeing inconsistencies is because the setup for rep 1 doesn't match the setup for rep 2 or for rep 3. So what I would do is get out of the habit of like doing that sort of squat eccentric to let it down and try to find a way to create your positioning consistently for each rep. Because if you're training inconsistently, we're going to be exhibiting strength inconsistently. We're going to have wild swings in performance on meet day. We're going to have all kinds of stuff like that going on.
Yeah.
Anything else you're thinking?
That's pretty in line with my thoughts.
What do you think about the straps?
I'm a pretty big advocate for not using your straps for your top sets.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
If you want it to be a PR, you gotta be using your hands. At least for one.
I think triples are...
And triples, yeah.
Even if you're...
I did my 5 today with no straps. It was a PR.
So, yeah. Danny's a little more resilient than I am, I think, because I'd be probably using straps for a 5. But I think a triple's very doable, even if you're hook grip, right? I think, yeah, if you're mixed grip, might be a little bit easier to do reps sometimes.
Definitely.
But even if you're hook grip, you should be able to do a triple, like a heavy triple, and that should be like okay.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not going to feel good, but hook grip never does. And you know, again, especially with a deadlift bar, right, where we're going to have a fair bit of flex to it. We want to be consistent in where that bar is in the hands because that's really going to inform our positioning. And I can see throughout this set, you know, that bar gets slightly lower, and we're kind of fingertipping it by the end. So we do run into inconsistencies with even where the bar is positioned. Whereas with grip, we'd likely see a little less of that because if that bar got too low in your fingers, it just goes, right? So you have to kind of reset your grip maybe between reps or hold it very, very tight.
It honestly looks too like on this third one, we just like don't fully let it come back down to the ground and like pull the slack out. We just kind of go for it. Mm-hmm. And I think like at this intensity, you really do need to be like practicing
like reset.
Yeah. And it might be worthwhile to even do 3 singles instead of a triple. And that gives you opportunity to practice your grip as well. Mm-hmm. And I think another thing I would do is just like film from the side for a block and like practice getting your hip height consistent every rep because that's going to make sumo the most predictable for you. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to, you know, pull something massive on your third, get it to like just above your knee and not lock out.
Yeah.
And then it's sad.
And it'll have been based off of your second, which makes total sense. But if you execute differently, all of a sudden your strength is different, right? Which is what I was saying about the difference between it being a strength issue and a skill issue. It's like those are kind of the same thing. But I mean, you're obviously strong, man. Like you're pulling 310 for a double here. Like you're obviously a very good deadlifter. But in terms of the technical consistency and execution, you know, those are the things that I think you can kind of work on a little bit. Now we got Tyler. Ooh, we got some equipped, Danny.
Woo!
Look at that, squat suit. All right, so Tyler said he's been lifting for over 8 years, I'd say. Squats shoulder width and wide stance. the clips are wide stance. Okay, these clips, gotcha. Having an issue with the elbows touching quads or brushing up against them when he's in the bottom. Tried moving arms out, but just don't feel that tightness when his arms are out wider. Any tips to avoid the elbows touching at the bottom of the squat? He squats low bar, and this happens with shoulder width squats and wide squats.
I mean,
so these
my
squats
elbows
are
touch
wide
my
stance,
quads a little bit.
Yeah.
Technically, in the rule book, it's as long as you're not like supporting the weight. So if it's like grazing, I've never seen anybody called on it yet. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who...
It'd have to be pretty blatant that you're getting an advantage from it. I don't think there's really any issue with that little bit of contact there. No. There shouldn't be anyways. You know, the other thing that we can do is, you know, as you're squatting here, you know, I'm seeing this real drive of like trying to really push the elbows forward, right? Which ends up, in my experience, usually just really disconnecting your upper back and your shoulder from the rest of your brace, which looks great here. But when we crank those forward, the shoulders tend to really protract. Shoulder blades, tend to really protract and like come forward towards the front of your body, as opposed to staying tied into the back and providing a really good shelf here. And I have a feeling that if we got a little heavier, you know, if we were using maybe straight weight instead of the bands, we'd be starting to see that bar kind of pull you forward a little and bully you around a little bit, right?
And I think this isn't even straps up yet either. So.
Yeah, well, yeah, that'll add a whole other element of being, you know, either
pulled forward.
Oh, there you go, right there. You can see it on this rep. Right as you get into the bottom, you can see that upper back start to go. And as you're driving those elbows forward, again, it creates tension. It creates some like tightness and maybe makes you feel like you've got the bar in a bit better position. But I think in the long run, it's not going to create as much tightness where it needs to, which is kind of through the area of the back that your lats are in. And you know, we want to be trying to pull these elbows kind of in towards like the middle of your back, or in towards your sides, or in towards your belt or whatever, as opposed to just driving them forwards. And you know, if the elbows were back here, you wouldn't be running into the quads with them either.
Yeah, those are my thoughts too. I I feel when I'm in equipment, like I'm almost over cueing that position because I want to be so rigid and so tight.
Because you know you're going to get pulled by the straps at least a little bit.
It's almost like probably too much, but it really does just like reinforce that position and help me keep myself more upright. I probably squat more upright in a squat suit than in my raw suit, and that's really just from being able to hold that back position. Otherwise, it's really easy for me to like lose it forward. Yeah, well, it's a much more delicate balance, I think, in equipment, and I think with single ply, yeah, you probably can afford to be a little bit more extended and be a little bit more upright because you have the suit to support that, right? If you're a little more upright and extended, that suit's gonna like pull you into that extension, and then when you get pulled by the bar and by your hips, you know, into a more neutral position at the bottom, versus, you know, being a little bit more flexed and a little bit more forward, getting pulled into the bottom by the straps, and then getting just, you know, turned into a C shape kind of. Yeah, and that's something to consider too when you're like adjusting your suit, right? Like how flexed can I handle? How extended can I handle in that position? And how tight are the straps? Yeah. What do you think of the width of the stance? So you said these are intentionally a wide stance, like variation. Okay. He says he does squats wide stance and shoulder width. Interesting. And these ones are wide stance. So, cool. I mean, I'm fine with it as an accessory. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what the intent would be, but are we pausing all of these reps? I feel like there's like some reps we're pausing, some reps we're not. So that would be another thing I'd try to sort out a little bit, is like, you know, what exercise are we doing here? Are we pausing some of them just because? Are we not pausing? You know, maybe it was just that first rep was kind of like, just forgot, didn't really pause. But yeah, that would be the other thing, is if we're gonna pause them all. If we're not pausing, don't pause them. But have that intent figured out for your exercise selection ahead of time. Other than that, just happy to see some equipment on the channel. Danny and I both love that shit. Hell yeah. All right. Last one of the day, Piotr.
doing some deadlifts here. All right, been lifting 2 or 3 years now. No meet plans, no injuries. Total's about 450 kilos. So 160, 115, 170 at 90 kilos body weight. Had some hiccups lately because of too tight a belt. Not sure if he means literal hiccups or figurative hiccups, but either way. So he says his back on his deadlift looks too rounded. Second warm-up set at 125 was done with the intention of making it more flat, but everything felt off. I feel like I'm pulling it all with the back and not using the legs enough. He says his deadlift is very close to his squat and doesn't want to go heavier. Setup tips, is it worth fixing, or do I just need to smash more weights and get stronger? I mean, the answer is always smash more weights and get stronger, but let's see what else we can
What's wrong with squatting more than your deadlift? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's saying his squat deadlift is very close to his squat and doesn't want to go heavier. Like, I'm not sure in which way, but either way you cut it, go heavier if you can.
Yeah.
Like, don't hold back and hamstring one of your lifts because the other one is catching up to it or overtaking it or whatever. Just get as strong as you can in all of them. Like, I know there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, my squat and my deadlift are the same. What do I do? And it's like, I don't know, continue being a good squatter? Like,
Yeah, I'm owning it at this point.
yeah, like, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. You know, a lot of people think that like that means they've made some kind of error or mistake or something because they're not like, you know, I deadlift 100 pounds more than my squat or whatever, right? But
Sometimes
not
we're
everybody's
just more built for
gonna
it.
do that. You're gonna be built, differently. And it's not a bad thing to be stronger, right? At the end of the day, if you have any care at all about powerlifting, you know, if you don't squat 5 kilos more because your deadlift isn't there, you're just taking 5 kilos off your total. Okay, what do you think about this deadlift, Danny? What are your feelings? What are your thoughts?
I'd be curious as to why the stance and the grip are the way that they are. I think I'd like to see a bit more narrow stance here and a bit more narrow grip, actually, just both in general. And I think the reason you're probably not feeling your legs very much is likely due to like your stance. So I think if you brought your stance in just a bit, you'd probably be able to access like that leg drive into the floor a little bit more. Probably create like a better hinged position for the deadlift and probably feel a lot stronger because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the first and main thing that I would go after here is, you know, if we bring your stance narrower, right? And then we bring your grip in to match. All of a sudden, you don't have to go nearly as far down to get to the bar, meaning you're not way down here pulled forward. You're a little more upright. You're able to get a flatter back, a more neutral position, and it's not going to feel off. You know, I think one of the reasons it might feel like you're doing it all with your back is because you're having to start really far down. You're having to go down to the bar a lot farther than you otherwise would. So yeah, narrowing it up, I think would be absolutely the first place I would go here.
Yeah, and like trying to visualize that we're trying to create more of like a vertical force than this like kind of horizontal pattern that we're seeing here. So you're really like sitting into the heels and then leaning back with all your body weight. The bar is going to lock out higher. That's a longer range of motion for you, and you are using your back a little bit more. So trying to press into the floor a little bit more and stay over the bar, I think will serve you well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the like back force is real here.
Strong back.
Yeah.
Real strong back.
Yeah. I would say, you know, one of the cues that I like, credit to Taylor on this one as well, is locking out up, not back, right? So as you're finishing the deadlift, think about, he always says puppet on a string, but like finish the lift with your hips. We don't necessarily need to get the shoulders that far back.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that's going to come hand in hand with that is we're going to be way back on our heels. And when we're really far back on our heels, sometimes, yeah, maybe we're not going to feel as much of that leg drive, as much of that kind of push and quad feel, you know, like they're contributing to the lift as much. Whereas if you just allow yourself to be that little bit more over the bar, like Danny was saying, and kind of push through the ball of your foot as well as your heel, you're probably going to get a little more out of the legs and a little more of that like feel like, okay, my trunk is bracing and my legs are doing the pushing and the lifting and the pulling and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and I want to say like film from the side. Honestly, front angle is probably good once in a while, but from the side is going to tell you a little bit more about like what's going on with your hips, and I think that's really beneficial for most of our lifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not as Instagram worthy, but it's worth it. So.
Yeah. The deadlift from the side, I think we're almost always going to be able to tell more.
Or even like a 45-degree angle, like
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. I think again to your point though that it is sometimes. I had a lifter who she only filmed from the side for like years and years and years, and we only ever saw the deadlift from the side. And then she started having some knee problems. And then I was like, you know what, let's just get one set from the front, and you could see. And whether or not this was the reason she had knee problems or a result of her like having some issues with that knee, but we saw her pull and her knee just went like on one side, and I was like, is that the side that hurts? And it was like, yep. So we got that figured out pretty quick. But
yeah, these days
sometimes useful to see from the front. But.
Typically now that we have like the app and it's so much more easy to upload videos there, I'm usually asking for like one from the side, one from the front on all the competition lifts.
Multiple
and that
angles.
way
It's always good.
getting a little bit of everything.
Yeah. What app are you talking about, Danny?
My strength book. Have you heard of it?
Oh, it's the Calgary Barbell app. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think I'll be interested to see what happens in a couple weeks if you go with that.
All right. That is going to be it today from Danny and I. So thanks for joining us. Thanks to Danny for hanging out. And she'll be back again next week and probably the week after that. She, one of us. All right.
I guess.
Like and subscribe, and leave a comment below if you thought we missed anything or if you had anything else to contribute to these lifters. I know they always really appreciate it, and we appreciate the engagement. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.